So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the IID Tech Exchange Seminar Series. My name is Ranga Settler. I'm one of the Associate Directors of the Institute for AI and Data Science. This particular series is meant to sort of try to get the university community to get to know research that's happening across the broader university. Usually faculty tend to sort of stick to their own domains and activities of their department. And what we want to do is try to get as many people as possible aware of research that's going on across the campus so that we can have potentially some serendipitous collaborations happen. And that's the intent of this. And so please try to evangelize this series with faculty in your department as well. And we're going to do this every semester. So please encourage your colleagues to also volunteer to present as part of the series. So today we have two interesting talks, one from the Department of Education and one from the Department of Computer Science. So the talks are about 25 minutes in length and with about 5 minutes for questions. And then speakers typically stick around for a few more minutes to engage with the audience. And so we'll start with today's first talk. Dr. Chris Proctor from the Department of Education will be speaking about his research. Right, Chris.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here, and I think we have cleverly scheduled this talk on the week for the major education conference, so we get just the interdisciplinary crowd here. Thank you for being here. I also have a newborn who just hit 2 months, so if I don't make any sense, then that's how it goes. All right, so I want to try to develop a sort of theory-based argument for the kind of designs we might want to be creating for tools and interfaces that support use of generative AI. I'm basically focusing on large language models, ChatGPT sort of thing, but we should zoom it out because that's obviously not the only kind of AI, and it will not be the cool AI next year. So David Labaree, an educational historian who taught my first course in grad school, said, you're here because you're trying to reform education, and you might want to know a little bit about the history, the last 150 years of people here to reform education. And his argument was that you don't reform education because it's this constant, intractable tension between these different forces in the United States. That's what he's specific to. That we have these three different priorities: democratic equality. We have this, going back to John Dewey, Horace Mann, the idea that everyone gets a fair shot. We need everyone to know how to read and write so they can participate in a democracy. Labaree identifies this as the perspective of the citizen. We might want to zoom that out just a little bit today. And the second is social efficiency, the idea that we want our society to run well. So this means we need people to have the skills they need to contribute and participate, job skills, college and career readiness. It also, though, means certain values that we certainly no longer hold in education research, but certainly once did, and it's worth holding on to that. Ideas like IQ testing and eugenics. The idea that we really don't need everyone to know that much. What we need is to find the really smart ones and raise them all the way up. Because if we can get geniuses, the whole project, right, was finding geniuses and cultivating them. That's where IQ testing and stats came from. Then they can take these positions of influence and it'll be better for everybody. Right? So we get these mixed values, but social efficiency, the idea that we want society to work well. I would lump national security as a priority in here as well. And then, and that's sort of the perspective of the taxpayer, which I think has some resonance right now. Social mobility is the third value, that you want your kid to do well in the future. This is the perspective of the consumer. And you can see, Labaree argues that two of these are considered as public goods. We have this education, everybody pays into it, and it makes us all better. And then the third one, the social mobility, is a private good. This is for my kid. So what I want to do is think about the idea of literacy, and I want to trace that forward from traditional notions of literacy, of print literacy, into computational and AI literacies, and think about the kinds of things we might want to be building and the kinds of things we might not want to be building. And I'll give two case studies, two examples of the work that I and the folks in my lab have been working on. So here's an operational definition of literacy. It comes from Andy DeSessa, a computer scientist. New literacy scholars will tell you it's a bit limited and coarse, but it is nice and concrete. It's a socially widespread, patterned deployment of skills and capabilities in a context of material support, hang in there, that is an exercise of material intelligence to achieve valued intellectual ends. So Ducessa talks about this idea of material intelligence, which I think is lovely. It's that intelligence is not just a sort of ethereal property of your brain, but it's a way of interacting with stuff, and it's embedded in stuff. You can look at very physically a workshop, right? Someone who knows their way around a workshop knows how to pick up a tool. They know what to do with the tools. Their body knows what to do. The practices, their familiarity with the context around them keeps them safe, reminds them of the way to do things. Intelligence is distributed. It's mediated by things. If you are a computer scientist and you use an IDE, an integrated development environment, right? You might feel that you're in this partnership relationship with the computer, that the computer is where some of your intelligence is. And if you kind of are not at your computer, you might feel like, oh gosh, I could really do this well, but I'm not with the tools with which I'm familiar. So this idea of material intelligence, that what makes us good at stuff is distributed out into what's around us. And it's not just me, I have literacy, but it's this socially distributed, like widely distributed pattern. So literacy is not just like, woo, I'm good at something, I have cooking literacy, but it's a property really more of a society. And this very much resonates with folks like Marshall McLuhan, who are interested in basically the study of media and how media shapes our societies. So this picture, we don't need too much, but I put it here because it's really the icon for all of my research. I'm interested in the practices at different scales of literacy. Part of it's up here. Part of it, though, is situated sociocultural. It's about me and the relationships with other people around, knowing how to walk into a room like this one and be someone. When I was a high school English teacher, I remember some of my students loved going to the library and others found it scary because they didn't know how to walk into a library, right? And then critical, understanding a little bit more the long-term throughways, the ways that factors like race and social class and gender give shape to our society and to the world as it is, and understanding that it could be different. And all of these practices, I argue and study, are embedded in the infrastructure of literacy that we have around us. So we're thinking today about the infrastructure of print literacy. That's the books and newspapers and magazines, all that stuff. Computational literacy is all of the apps and all of these shape and are woven into, right? Like Facebook is part of you. It's part of your relationships. It's part of your family. The values that Facebook weaves into those relationships are part of you, for better and worse. So I want to think about, from Labourie's perspective, of these different values of education, what's the use of literacy? What's the use of these widespread capabilities? These are not my values, but I want to think sort of dispassionately. Like if you're just trying to run a great country, like what's the use in having everybody be able to read and write, this print literacy? This is a dumb bar graph. Disagree with me all you want. I'm trying to make a sort of abstract point. But I think for democratic equality, it's really important. If you want to have anything like a democratic society, people have got to know what's going on, right? And they got to be able to communicate. Think about the most important amendments to our Constitution, like freedom of speech. A lot of that happens through print. Social efficiency, it's really important for also, and social mobility, it's really important for also. There's something interesting about social mobility, some longstanding argument within education around, is it the sort of human capital? Do people get education and then succeed because they're just better at stuff and the job market rewards? Or is it more signaling? It's like, oh, you know Shakespeare, cool. Either way, you need people around you to create this network. If you went with your English major to a society that didn't do print literacy, it wouldn't be worth anything to you. So I'm interested in the social value of widespread literacy of different kinds, even for this private good of social mobility. So for computing, for example, how much social mobility does it give you to have everybody else be reasonably familiar with how to read and write with computer tools? I think that computational literacy is partly you see this go down because I think it's a bit of like low-hanging fruit, diminishing returns. Like if I had to choose between just print reading and writing or computers, I think I'd probably choose print, but the other one's a nice addition on there. But I think that computational literacy contributes to democratic equality. We have these arguments like ones I put out that understanding the computational infrastructure of all of the social issues that we have is hugely important. because it's where a lot of it happens right now. We have this like very stark example right now, right, of Elon Musk going around the government and saying like the computers, the servers, that's where the power is. If I can get my hands on the computer, he's not wrong, right? For social efficiency, I think that it's like really powerful to have a society that is organized around computers. It does a lot of good. It accelerates our economy. It helps us dramatically increase national security. You can see all this tension right now in the world around like, oh, who's actually making the chips? Like, what? That would be nice to have some stability there. But I think there's also an aspect of social efficiency which is not very well aligned with sort of like a pluralistic democracy. There's an interesting article from Williamson a few years ago talking about the concept of computationally governable citizens. The idea that one of the things that print literacy does is it makes people governable. We have this presumption that everyone knows how to read and write, which gives some sense of legitimacy to the laws that we put out, right? You break the law, I'm going to punish you because I can reasonably expect that you should know the law. Whether or not it's really reasonable in every situation, but at least it creates this like sense of legitimacy that you ought to have known the law. I expect you to have known the law. And that's a reading and writing society. And we have the same kind of thing with computational literacy. We have this presumption that I think is way out ahead of where people's skills actually are, that you ought to know how to work computers. You ought to know how to interact. There was a website for that. There was an app for that. If for the last 5 years, if you wanted to make an asylum claim in the United States, which you have the right to do under the United Nations, you had to sign up for an interview by an app. If you don't have a smartphone or you don't know how to get an app, it's not going to happen. The only way that it was available was for an app. And many of the services which we sort of expect and the rights that we expect in the United States are mediated now non-negotiably in computational terms. Right? If I want to log in to login.gov, right? Like I got to have two-factor authentication. You don't know how to like install an authenticator app on your cell phone? Sorry, I guess you're not applying for a passport. So the standards go up there, and whatever extent we've actually succeeded in computer science education and helping people understand these things, I think a bit out ahead of that is the presumption that we now make that we can expect people and we can demand that people use these systems. You can see where this is going with AI. And then for social mobility, there was a huge argument, right? Everyone's got to learn computer science. You're going to make $400,000 a year. It's going to be great. You'll be at Google playing volleyball all day. And I mean, you can see like it hasn't. There's questions here. I mean, there's questions now, like very basic questions, like how many people do we need who actually even know computer science? Because many of the glitzy computer science jobs don't need that much computer science. They're sort of just sticking APIs together, and AI is pretty good at that. So, I don't right. There's these memes going around now about the computer science majors who are all like fighting over barista jobs. It's like, I think that's a bit overblown. I think that computer science and computing is hugely powerful and full of potential, but the presumption that it's just like this easy one-step path to whatever you might want, I don't know. And then I think if we think about AI literacies, whatever those might be, we're in very early days there. I would argue, I think that they're. This is just prognosticating, but I don't see the explosion of AI into our public sphere doing a lot for the robustness of our discourse in a democratic society right now. I think there's a lot more concerns out there than there's optimism in that area. I think AI feels very likely a boon for social efficiency, but not the democratic kind, more the authoritarian kind, right? It allows us to surveil. All of these tools are getting more and more into our inner minds and more sort of aligning us. And you can see other countries are far out ahead of us in deploying AI in authoritarian ways. So I think that there's a lot of social value if you're the one in charge of widespread AI literacy, and then the kind of presumptions that may come along with that about the table stakes for participation in society. So I'm similarly, I don't know. So this is sort of my view of kind of what this, but we don't know what any of this stuff is, right? Let's keep that in mind. So the point here is that I don't think that the explosion of AI into our society is necessarily and just without any trouble leading us to the future that we want to get to. So I think that one thing that's going on, sort of why is this happening, is that the infrastructure is becoming more and more powerful and it's taking over our practices. So when we moved from a print economy to an online social media economy, and especially when Google Reader died, we kind of gave up the curating function. We weren't really choosing anymore what we were going to see. It got delivered to us. I think social media started more and more to take on an interpretive role, not just presenting us with content, but also telling us what it means. And with AI, you can see this much more happening as well. So I think you could sort of think that the infrastructure is kind of like seeping up or reaching up or kind of ossifying our practices, shaping them in ways. And I think it, essentially is sort of, I don't hold the view of freedom that is like you should just be like unbound and this like atomic disconnected particle, but it's limiting. And whoever has the capacity to shape the infrastructure, I think more and more has the capacity to shape our practices at all these different scales, from our habits of mind up to how we interact and socialize and get our news, up to our own sensibilities about the way the world is set up and why it's set up that way and whether it's right and whether it ought to change. So what could we do? I think we need to sort of change or dig into the relationship between the practices and the infrastructure. And that's what I'm going to give you a couple snapshots really quickly. I don't have time to get into it too much of projects we're doing. So my hypothesis is that we need to, and Adrian, I'm so glad you're here. We're going to get into I think we went, this is clumsily written, but I think we need tools which keep the task model in the domain of the user, not the infrastructure. I want really, as we use these powerful tools, AI tools now I'm talking about specifically, I want to have the user be the one who has in mind what you're trying to get out of it and the shape of what's going to come out of that. And I'm just jumping ahead here. This has been a huge question and a huge topic of conversation in computer science education. This basically tracks perfectly with the idea of computational thinking. The idea that computational thinking is a mapping of a domain problem into computational terms. Right? You've got this idea, you're the one who's got the idea of what you're trying to accomplish, and then you're the one who is mapping that or shaping it, giving it structure to make it computationally tractable. So you've got, this is sort of an abstraction of that you have this task model, you know what you're trying to do, and then maybe the AI is going to do it for you. So what might that look like? I don't think it looks exactly like what a lot of the tools that are out there right now look like. So the first case study, again, I'm just zooming through these, but AI supported writing, right? So I think right now, this is jumping ahead. This is the tool I'm going to be talking about. And there's an AI writing contest launching in a couple of weeks. If you know any teachers or have any kids, join in. The premise of this is we don't know what these practices are going to look like. So we're putting the tools out with some support, and maybe we can figure out what's powerful together. But the current interfaces like ChatGPT, they don't provide support for modeling the writing task, right? You go because you got your paper due tomorrow. I'm being snarky here and suggesting it's only used for cheating, but it's not like a huge exaggeration, right? But the idea is that you, right? The idea is that you don't know exactly, like you get what you ask for from ChatGPT, and if you're a powerful writer, you can use it in powerful ways, but it's not necessarily pedagogically. There's all these questions, right? It's not necessarily going to leave you with a better understanding of composition, but you might not even know what you're asking for, and then you're not necessarily going to get it. So we've been playing around in my lab with this idea of declarative narrative, which is a sort of a pun from programming term. Declarative programming is where you don't write out the solution of what you're trying to do. You kind of just tell the system what you want in specific enough terms, and then it actually like finishes doing it. So what if we did that for writing? What if we had a declarative approach to writing? And the metaphor here is what if the author is a little bit more like a film director, where the director is not the actor, right? They don't have that talent. They're not building the sets. They're not the Foley artist. They're not doing the editing. But still, they retain authorial intent and composition of the whole piece. They're orchestrating, pulling together a lot of different talent from a lot of different places. And if some of those are from AI, okay. I think that's a possibility. And so what we're exploring here is what if we could extend the tools for writing along the lines of literary elements? If you've been in a high school English class anytime recently, we've got plot and setting and mood and tone and character and irony, all that. What if we could delegate some of those to AI? So this is what it's looking like, and this is what the AI writing contest is going to explore. This is Unfold Studio. It's sorry, the colors are all, it's our staging environment. But the first idea is, what if we could have a generate function, which is very much like ChatGPT. You give it a prompt and you get something back, but it's embedded within a continuous narrative. So you've decided the context of what's coming, you've decided where you want this generation to happen, and then you decide what's coming again afterwards. So I think this has a lot more potential, even though it's not technically any different than ChatGPT, it's just using that API. But it has a lot more potential as an author to control the effect of your writing. You get to decide the sort of what the shape of the whole thing is going to be. You get to decide really you have much more control over the voice and the kind of impact it's going to have on the audience. So that's sort of like details. We could also imagine with plot, this actually creates an open-ended you have a text box now, and it could be a sequence of multiple text boxes. So it creates an open-ended bubble of free choice within the narrative where you still have specified where it's going to rejoin the narrative that you've scripted before and then continue. So now you let the player or reader of your story do whatever they want within the story. It's a little bit like a choose your own adventure story. It's a little bit like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing where you're in this like conversational, like, I want to jump out the window. And then we're like, okay, well, here's what happened when you jumped out the window, right? But it's not just throwing the authorial agency off and being like, okay, now AI, you take over. You've scripted when and where it's going to come back together again. And so the students I'm working with have very cleverly implemented this. So it actually evaluates each time you type something in. And if it's just off the wall, it's going to be like, you can't do that. But otherwise, it's going to sort of steer you toward the desired end and then decide when you've gotten close enough that we can continue the story. For the sake of time, I won't show the next one, but you can also do the same thing with character. And then you can import chunks of these narratives together so that you can compose a story with the class. Each person in the class could write a character of someone they know well, and then you could bring them together into the story and have them interact with each other. Kind of wild. One other quick snapshot. I will try to end in a moment so that we have time for both of our talks. But AI supported qualitative research. Anybody here do qualitative research? Like coding, working with like text. Takes a long time. All the tools now are like, with AI. And they're basically like, okay, here's the answer. Here's your finding. And I'm really concerned about what that's going to look like in a conference presentation or an article when people ask, probe just a little bit more, like, so tell me more about your methods. And you're like, I don't know, ChatGPT, go tell it. That's not great, right? Especially for folks who understand qualitative research as fundamentally a subjective process of sort of construing a reality, where the meaning that you are making in the course of the research is really the goal. Well, if you're totally delegating that to the AI, then what have you got left? So I have a tool that I've been working with a number of students on for a couple of years, a tool for qualitative data analysis designed to support computational thinking. This is up now. You can install it. It works. There's a tutorial. I have a little community of collaborators, faculty, and postdocs around the world constantly bugging me about problems. I love it. It's really great. Journal of Open Source Software was really fun, having an open review process managed through GitHub issues. It sounds kind of, I've never had such a good review experience. But there are longstanding concerns in qualitative data analysis about qualitative QDA software, that it creates a distance between the researcher and the data, concerns about homogenization, standardization of interpretation, right? This is sort of like auto-analyze. Digital tools mechanize and dehumanize qualitative research. And I think these are poised to be like super amplified by the introduction of AI into these tools, and especially just because of the scale, right? You want to get your like 4 rounds of iterative coding of your corpus of hundreds of documents done by tomorrow. It's compelling. We're going to see what happens. So my proposal is that a tighter partnership between the researcher and the tool may yield more intimate, situated, and humanized insights grounded in the researcher's subjectivity. So a closer relationship with the tool, yeah, it'll make you more efficient, whatever. I don't care about that. What I care about is it can create a more humanizing experience of research. So if you're like a qualitative researcher's qualitative researcher, this could be your thing. But I think this depends on the researcher's ability to conceptualize the data and the process in computational terms. That is, computational thinking specifically. If you are fundamentally working on organizing codes into a nested hierarchy of codes, like the concept of trees that you learned in your algorithms class can be a very powerful thing to have in your mind. And an interface that exposes that to you more directly can be a powerful tool. It's a command line based tool, which is not everybody's cup of tea, but it is mine. And I mean, I started making this because I wanted the tool I wanted for my dissertation. Great procrastination. But I have found, and it's not for everybody, but if it is the way you like to think, then I would like for there to be a tool that lets you do that. If you like the idea of having standardized file formats, if you like the idea of piping the results of one analysis into the next, or having a totally reproducible analysis, right, where you can like rerun one script and rebuild your dissertation, like, from the data all the way up. Cute, great. Then here's this. If you like composing like really specific, powerful queries, then those are things that the existing tools really don't do well. I found myself on some of the like really slow, clunky, super expensive tools that you know and love. You're like getting carpal tunnel syndrome, clicking around, like it's not exposing to me, it's not supporting to me. Fundamentally, this is the thing. It's not exposing to me the task model, the helping me to conceptualize in my mind what it is I'm trying to do. So I mean, this doesn't look great on the screen, does it? But this is what QC looks like. And the AI affordances that we're building into this, and this is really just coming out of our practice in the lab, the auto-coding. Okay, clearly, like AI is really good at following patterns. So if you could have an online classification scheme, right, that sort of starts along with you, starts picking up on where you're going, and can actually report metrics on like reliability of what you're doing. I think that's really interesting, and I think you could get going 5 or 10 examples of what you're coding, and then it could be like, oh, here's a few more. What do you think about this one? And it may actually be choosing the ones that it's most uncertain about. Like, what about this one? What do you think about this? That could actually help you to really quickly conceptually refine the meaning of the codes that you're after. This came out of a mess of a project we had with like many hours, 40 different people we interviewed, 4 different coders coding things. We had 2,000, 2,500 instances of codes with something like 1,600 distinct codes. It was like an open code book when it was way too big. How are we going to organize these? Which of these codes are examples of each other? Dipping into technical for just a second. If you use a tool like sentence embeddings, then you can have the LLMs are very powerful, but I think the gold for qualitative researchers is actually the embeddings, these like spaces of meaning kind of below the surface. And you can take any sentence and throw it in and turn it into a vector with a location, with the premise being that things that are closer have a closer meaning to each other. So now you can take all of the different exemplars of the code that you've taken, and you can see them kind of like in a bubble in this high dimensional space. And now you can start to ask questions like, which codes are close to each other? Which codes are not close to each other? How does that correlate with other things? You could talk about the density of codes in terms of evaluating the code quality. You could start to have these automated alternatives to inter-rater reliability in terms of like, can you rebuild the model? So these are things that we're just playing around with. We have sort of like sketchy versions that we use internally. They're not part of the tool yet, but they will be soon. And where to next is we have a paper at the Constructionism Conference in Zurich this summer, which my student Varun is graduate of CSE master's program here, fantastic, is presenting on the idea of permeability. We want interfaces that are permeable, that invite people to sink themselves into it. And this is really thinking about identity. Make it part of yourself, grow through it. Thinking about the idea of potting soil. When you start a little seedling, the soil that you planted in becomes part of it, and you would not tear that all away. Well, very carefully, but like the idea is that's really part of the plant that's going forward, and then later we're playing with this idea of a trellis that again becomes part of the plant while you provide support on the way up. So I want interfaces that sort of invite you to make them part of yourself. And the sort of idea of posthumanism sounds like a scary term. It's basically the idea that a lot of harm has come from trying to create these rigid categories of who's really fully human and who's not. This comes particularly out of Black feminism, but it turns out to be really useful in a lot of different places right now. And my colleague Tim Morrell, I've learned a lot from here. But the idea of much more being open to thinking of ourselves. What's the boundary between me and my tool? I don't know. It's complicated. We have a tricky relationship. So those are things we're starting to think about going forward. Thank you so much. I don't think we have time for questions right now, but I will stick around afterwards.
We'll ask a couple of questions.
Okay.
So I want your comment on what kind of support there is for the verification end. So let me give you an example. So with what I do, there's always a right and a wrong, right? But let's take the example of generating text, because I thought that was incredibly interesting. What if I'm writing a historical novel and the thing tells me that Churchill's early experiences in Africa shaped the way that he thought about fighting, but really he's in Afghanistan, right? It's difficult to go through and find those, and is there technology for supporting that, right?
Thank you so much. A quick response. I don't think I'm the best person to answer that, and I don't think that my students on their own have the technical depth to be able to answer that. I think this is what I would punt back is to say that's hugely important, and we definitely need more interdisciplinary spaces like this on campus, but we also need more interdisciplinary courses, right? I've been offering a course for the last few semesters on LLMs in education, trying to get more students who've got the technical background, because you can build stuff to sort of play around, and ultimately what we're doing is studying how people use it and the practices that come out of it. But for that, you need more than that, right? You need people who like seriously have taken the classes on machine learning and know how to do evaluation, right? Know how to come up with some sort of sensible test, and then hopefully you're doing some training and revision. And one thing I'm really excited about is that at UB we have the capacity coming on to do that. I'm really excited about the AI in Society initiative. We just bought a machine with 700 gigs of RAM and can deploy the not DeepSeek, but have you seen R1 1776, the US trained version. But you need that infrastructure to be able to answer those kinds of questions. And I think they're hugely important, because otherwise you're either going to ignore those questions and have really big problems, or you're going to have like kind of ignorance, right? Like sort of like professional development for people that's just sort of like can't trust Google, it's not secure. I'm like, it's more secure than, but it's complicated, right? Like, thank you so much. Maybe.
So I was just going to kind of add to that. So I'm a librarian, and so I'm a member of the Center for Information Integrity here on campus, and we just had our members meeting about a week ago. And information integrity around AI is like obviously like a really super huge thing, and there are a number of faculty on this campus that are working on the integrity of what's going into these systems. So it's interesting the synergies that I see happening around AI and some of the bias and skepticism and all of that. But I really do love your work. I'm a qualitative researcher myself.
Maybe I'll just close and then we can transition by saying thank you so much. And one thing I desperately want, both for the technical infrastructure and for efforts like the Center for Information Integrity, like we've got to have that work become accessible to a qualitative researcher, doctoral student in education, right? Who can take that up and we can form, because honestly, doc students are much more able to create these bonds across departments, right? Like, hey, I went to that talk, like start doing that. That's what we need a lot more of. And because you can't ask everybody to become an expert in the infrastructure, right? That's just gatekeeping, and there's other things to become experts in. But I think making more of our work exposed to each other and also exposed to critique from each other, I think is what I'm really, really excited about in the years to come here. Thank you. So thank you all so much, and I can't wait for our next talk.
That was an excellent talk, and our next speaker will be Professor Matt KNEPLEY from the Computer Science Department.
We can open it with Acrobat. You open it with Acrobat, then the movie can play. Nope. Great. Okay. So I definitely agree with what I heard that you need to become more.
Okay, excuse me, Matt. It seems not that audible online.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Can you adjust the microphone, maybe?
How's that?
Perfect.
Thanks,
you.
Wenyao. So I definitely believe we have to become more interdisciplinary. And so my career is really about doing interdisciplinary stuff with computer science, with applied mathematics, and helping advance science. That's what I believe computational science means, is that you use these things to advance scientific understanding. So basically, my expertise is in what's called solvers. That's taking a set of equations and figuring out what they imply. And everyone would like fast solvers, of course. I'm really working on scalable solvers, which means as you increase the input data, increase the output data, the performance characteristics are predictable and also hopefully low polynomial, linear would be great. And I tend to focus on multi-scale, multi-physics problems, so complicated problems, and I'll try to go over some examples of these kind of things. I would just like to start out, though, and tell you that I work on a set of software libraries that help do this. The reason I think it's interesting is this is a group that I've actually been working with them since 1996, but I officially became an employee. This used to be a group that was centered at Argonne National Lab. So I became a lab employee in 2001 after I would worked with them my entire graduate career. And now it's no longer thought of as an Argonne National Lab group. We have people on every continent except Antarctica. We have people in industry, in academia, and in government labs. And it is a society. We have common goals. We are not paid to do this. This is a volunteer activity. And if you think about the volunteer societies in early America, this is what de Tocqueville is talking about when he writes, this is what we have. And we produce things of real value. In fact, I wouldn't have my job at UB without doing this work. I've done work on things like representing unstructured meshes as directed acyclic graphs, which allows you to do some nice things, on the composition of nonlinear solvers for the acceleration of a solution, of what's called finite element methods, which are popular for simulating the mechanics of these kind of things. Here is the Hikurangi Fault that's off the coast of New Zealand, and we're looking at predictive slip for certain kinds of earthquakes. But I'm an applied mathematician, so my real contribution was figuring out a very general way of representing these things. And I'm part of the CREST Center. It's a center which is focused on developing green rocket propellants. So here, instead of burning hydrazine, which if you know anything about is a pretty horrible substance and why we put rocket platforms out way away from cities, and we want to burn wax instead, burn paraffin. And, oh, it's not playing. It should play. Oh, you're kidding. Go back. Is there any way to oh, I had a nice movie. It should play. It plays on my Acrobat. Oh, it's too bad. But we also do things like simulate the interior of the Earth. So here's a cutaway, and these are cold, denser slabs that are descending into the Earth, and this is the hot mantle. My postdoc, Toby Isaac, and my friend Carsten Burstead developed the technology to do these kind of multi-scale representations that look like blocks here. And this supports a lot of things like, refinement of these representations and extrusion and conversion and stuff. And we, a while ago, published an article about it. And what it does is it unifies a whole lot of different things using small number of ideas from applied mathematics. So my job is to eliminate code. I want to use the most powerful tool in the computer scientist toolkit, which is abstraction. And we want to crush down the amount of things that we have as abstractions. And this is a powerful abstraction. It allows us to do things like simulate the combustion chamber of a rocket burning a different fuel, which I had a video of. But we can also use the same exact stuff to simulate the slip on faults that are participating in a particular earthquake. So this is the Hikurangi, as I said. Here we're simulating a quake on Mars. It turns out that when we landed on Mars, we also put seismometers there. And this was an actual Mars quake that we measured and then simulated. And the guys that I work with at ETH Zurich are great at making pictures, so it looks awesome, right? But the exact same kind of code that I wrote can be used here. The people that I work with at KAUST, King Abdullah University for Science and Technology, they are interested in very high-speed compressible flows over a wing to look at drag, also controllability. And so there's a code they have, SSDC, and it's based on the same idea. So this is my mesh representation stuff. And you can see that what they've done is they originally broke it up in, using simplices, and then I converted those simplices into hexahedra automatically in parallel. And you know, you should be able to do that, but it was really easy for me to do it. So there are entire teams of tens of people that work on stuff at big companies like Ansys. People use this because if you can get it done with fewer ideas, you can get it done with fewer people. I did this all by myself. I also work on my friend Blaise Bourdon in the mathematics department up in McMaster, just across the border. Looks at thermal fracturing. So these are thermal cracks in a fan blade. You can see that they're 3D, they're intersecting, they have complicated topologies. We can represent all of this stuff. And there are other ways of representing things. So we can represent data as particle swarms. And so the CREST Center, they do represent continuum mechanics with meshes, but there's other things we want to represent with particles, such as small drops of atomized fuel. We also use it to represent radiation because it's more flexible. You could represent radiation on a grid, but there's a big artificial diffusivity, so there's applied math reasons why you don't want to do that. And so we have different things. And my postdoc, Joe Poste, was the one who did the real pioneering development to make this available. And he developed a way to take fields that are supported on meshes and push them to particles and back and forth where you conserve things you want to conserve structurally, like energy, momentum, and other more complicated things. And so, for instance, we've used this exact thing to look at plasma kinetics. So here's a mesh meshing up kind of an ideal toroid, something you would use as a tokamak, and then we put particles in it and look how they go around and try to get things like looking at thermal quench. And we can do things like look at the phase space behavior of impinging particle beams and what kind of structures you see there. And it's also used to here is a continuum mechanics code looking at deformation of the Earth, but we'd like to follow the composition. So the mechanical properties, like the stress and strain, are represented on meshes, but the composition is represented by particles, so you can get very large deformations and flow. And this is my friend Dave May's code. And we can also do things like micro modeling. So here, my student Darsh Nathawani was looking at the formation of droplets, like a microscopic model that we believe to be, close to true for how droplets behave. And these are droplets with different viscous properties. And we since have developed a model that allows you to also look at what happens if you, instead of letting gravity pull the droplet off, have a shear co-flow. And that's more realistic for things like drug delivery. It's more realistic for things like atomization in a rocket engine. And it's more realistic for things like impurities in the tokamak. So the message is that there are many, many different kinds of science applications, but they're unified in the tools they use to represent and analyze the phenomena that's going on. And it's nice if we can get a conceptual framework that shows that unification, and that's good, and that's how it worked for hundreds of years, right? And this is the domains of continuum mechanics. Continuum mechanics is a unification of a whole bunch of engineering disciplines where they said the common mathematics is at work here. But the most amazing thing that's happened in my lifetime, basically, is that there's a second unification, and that is the concrete tools that we use to compute predictions, to infer movements from data. All these can be unified by common software abstractions, and we're just at the beginning of this. I mean, if you think ASME, the American Society for Mechanical Engineers, was founded about 200 years ago, I think, and that society was founded because boilers were exploding. And what they did was to standardize the understanding of construction and measurement of boilers and properties of them. And that was a huge win, because now we can talk systematically about how we manufacture these things, how we rate these things, how we monitor them, and people stop dying from exploding boilers. And I think we're at the point of a similar revolution now, where we're talking about standardizing software innovations. The first software library in history, as far as I know, was produced in Zurich in 1970, and they called it the Handbook for Automatic Computation. So they had no metaphor except for a book for a software library. This idea, 3 years later, was taken to Argonne National Lab and became a piece of software that still exists called the Basic Linear Algebra Subroutines, BLAS. And it is such a powerful idea that it is still what is used. In fact, if you look at PyTorch or something, that uses BLAS. It is the basis on which the AI computational revolution is built. And my life's work is to raise that floor up past basic linear algebra to complicated linear algebra to representation of differential equations to representation of variational inequalities, to give people tools for representing their ideas. This is why I liked Chris' talk so much, because he's saying, in my mind, he's saying, look, what if we could use AI to give people structures for representing their ideas, computational structures for representing their ideas? This is exactly the same thing that I am involved in. The idea is to empower people to connect these ideas in different and unexpected ways, but those connections are consistent. The computer assures me the consistency of my particle representation and my mesh representation. It assures me the consistency of my energy equation, my momentum equation, my mass conservation equation. There are even tools I didn't talk about that I'm tremendously interested in, namely these tools for automatic proof and proof verification. And this is what I think the future is for generative AI, because generative AI without verification, I think is going to run out very quickly. But if you look at where all the energy in computational math has gone over the last couple of years, 5 years, I would say, it's into projects like the Lean Math Project from Kevin Buzzard at Imperial College London, where he's saying, we are going to standardize the entire undergraduate curriculum in Lean. We are going to have every student have a machine checkable proof of every assignment. That is an amazing thing. And you can see many different reasons why that's great. It's great just to be able to get up to that level, to have the infrastructure, then everyone starts there. Then you could, because right now you can't imagine doing a publishable proof with this stuff because you have to start from zero. But what if you could start from undergrad? That would be great. That might even work. What if you could start from grad? But more than that, what if we generate an entire cohort, an entire generation of mathematicians who think that they ought to be able to automatically check all their proofs? If they think that that is the standard that people should obey, that would be remarkable, right? And third, what if the technology for the automation of this stuff becomes that powerful? We could think about automating, just as binary code is sufficient to represent everything you could represent on the computer, these kind of proofs are sufficient to prove all these kind of properties that we want to get at. It's many layers deep. So imagine being able to verify all of the guesses being generated from a generative system. That's the dream, right? Then it's doing its real job, which is search. Generative systems are amazing search engines, right? What we can't use them for is ground truth, right? Because they're not designed to be true. They're designed to be hard to distinguish from true, which is totally different. Right? And we have tools that are designed to verify. And marrying the two of them, I think, is one of the biggest challenges for the upcoming decade, right? That is going to be how we go forward. So I think that's my last slide. So I'll just finish there. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, let's get some questions.
Sorry, I'll take the privilege and ask a question. This is thrilling, and you're not wrong. Those images are awesome. So it seems to me that the social sciences, in ways we're not really very cognizant of, have rely on the metaphors implicit in the mathematical tools we have available. In that if you look all over the place, I think ecology, for example, in the 60s and 70s, when we really very linear, low-dimensional systems were what we could use for modeling, we had a lot of linear, sort of phase-based models of how ecosystems change.
That's right.
And now I think we have a lot more simulations, a lot more procedural things that aren't even
where they'll say a swarm of 1 billion particles do this, and then we extract a pattern or something.
So even if you don't know how to do that stuff, I think the metaphors we're using to think are growing and changing. So that's on one side. On the other side, I know the mathematicians for a long time, and still I think, are resistant to standardization of notation, because there's this idea that it's contextual, and it's about communication within our field. We don't want. So my question is, folks like Stephen Wolfram have been thinking for a while that do you see us going toward, and do you think it's desirable that theory actually gets expressed in computational terms?
Oh, I definitely do. And I would say that I am very sympathetic to the idea that individual metaphors are important. So what I want are not tools that prescribe the metaphor. I want tools that make it easy for you to embed your metaphor in mine. Yeah. That's right. So not only do all these people want to do a different thing, but they all want to think about it a completely different way. And really, my job is to represent my stuff the way they want to see it. And that's a large part of what I do. I spend at least half my time just trying to understand their objectives, how their science works, what they want to achieve. Because you need someone that does that, and that's sort of where I am. I understand the math, but if you don't take the time to understand something about the science, you're not a scientist. I'm not a scientist. I do not dig up new facts about the world, right? That's not how I work. But I can understand the science. I can spend the time looking over what are the prior results, how did they make it to this particular conclusion. I can do that, and if you're not willing to put in that time, you're just not going to be able to bring people along. I mean, here's another AI metaphor. If you don't have the trust of the people you're working with, you don't have anything there. And trust is the large issue. It's always been. It's not just an issue with AI. This is a whole trust issue. Okay, these people in Ablate, they say, I want to build my software on your thing. Okay, they spent $8 million on that center. What if I stop supporting my software tomorrow? What happens to them? They're out. They've how many man hours? There's thousands of hours spent doing this code. They wouldn't be able to afford a new one. So if they choose wrong, and I all of a sudden stop supporting it, so it won't go to the next architecture that comes out in 2 years, they're out of a job. So if they don't trust me that way, then they'll never use it. And this is not unique to computation. This is how we choose accounting firms and plumbers and stuff. And so this is a similar metaphor. And it's true in AI too. The issue of trust is very real. You got to know what to trust things for, how to verify it, right? Yeah.
Any other questions?
Can I ask a question? I'm on.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
That's Wenyao, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. This is amazing. Very, very interesting. So I'm curious about from mathematician perspective. Sorry, in my eye, you are a mathematician. You are not.
Well, that's a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah. I see there are more and more mathematicians begin to use AI to solve math problem.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts? Did you see the role AI can play in your research work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let me defer to authority. So if you haven't watched it and you're interested in this, Terence Tao, the world's best living math communicator, gave a talk 2 weeks ago at the Simons Foundation, which is on YouTube, entitled AI for Mathematics. So I watched this, and there's no one better. And he does a very good job with a broad brush. And so I would say this, about 75% of his talk was taken up with things that come out of proof assistance, and about 25% was things that come out of generative systems. And I think his conclusion, and I would say also mine, is that the real potential of generative systems is when paired with verification systems, because there's a real value to search, to thinking of different avenues for the proof. Lots of proof depends on cases, and investigating all those cases is something that generative systems can really do. But without verification, you spend at least as much time, checking them as you would coming up with them yourself. And he points this out. But paired with verification systems, they can be really powerful. And I think that in the next decade, that development will revolutionize the way that people deal with math. And I believe even in education, I think, that in the class that I teach, the freshman class, I already use automatic verification of the small proofs that they do. I think this will become de rigueur and happen everywhere. And I think we should anticipate that. And the other thing I think that's going to be slower but will happen is this will come to journals. That there will be a certain set of journals that say, we will not accept something that has not been computer verified. There will always be journals that will allow you to get away with things. But the premier journals, the important ones, within 10 years, will have all transitioned to, you must at least verify part of this. Maybe you don't know how to do everything, but certainly the core pieces should be automatically verified. So it was a really good question.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
I'm wondering if there's any abstractions in scientific computing that you think should be used in AI, or any in AI that should be used in...
So, okay, that's a great one. I'll just pick one, but this is my hobby horse for AI. And that is, I think first I'll take the math one. So the math one that should come into AI is this idea of regularity. And regularity is the fancy math word for smoothness. And smoothness is just a math way of saying how predictable something is. Because if it's smooth, it doesn't change much. And now is a pretty good guess for later. And if it's not smooth, well, now is not a good guess. Training is the Achilles heel of machine learning right now. And I was just explaining this in class, the way I think about it is that the systems that I'm used to building that are small, made out of simple parts, are built for understandable. So the forward problem is hard because it's hard to build an accurate system out of those simple few parts. But the inverse problem's easy, because once I solve it, I know exactly what it means, right? ML is the inverse. ML is, I'm going to build a giant system, and it's going to be really accurate for prediction. And a lot of times that's what you want. But trying to do inference with it is really difficult, because I got a billion parameters. What do they mean, right? And so this is, I think, the avenue. I don't think I have the understandability thing cracked. I mean, if someone does, just Nobel Prize, right? But what I would say is the regularity of the data that we're looking at should determine how we treat the training process. ML grew up on vision. Vision data is very irregular. You know, photos have huge gradients, have weird ridges and stuff like that. And so we got used to very, very irregular training data. And we built systems that could cope with that, but they're very, very slow. Training is incredibly slow and incredibly costly. If you have data that is more regular, flow fields, longitudinal data, right? Utility bills. I mean, these are all things that have a large amount of smoothness, and they have it for physical reasons. And with that, we can do much, much better training. So my friend Stefano Zampini has a good article that came out at the end of last year, where he shows that traditional optimization methods can train hundreds of times faster if the training data are stuff like fluid flows that are very smooth. And so I think this, considering the regularity of the input data, the training data, when choosing how to solve it, is a place where numerical analysis can really inform ML practice.
Excellent. Let's
Thanks,
thank Matt again. And I think today we had two really fascinating talks, and Matt even managed to connect them up. And I think that's what sort of the intent of this seminar series was, to generate this sort of conversation and to have different thought processes come together. So thanks very much for participating, and please do let your colleagues also know to sign up for the series. And yeah, please hang around to chat a little bit. There's some snacks there. And